Hello, Aries. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you're here. Aries, this is your new moon forecast. This report is for Aries sun, Aries moon, Aries rising signs, anyone with a strong presence of Aries in their chart, whether it's your natal chart, your draconic chart, your secondary progressions. Maybe you're just here to understand the Aries person in your life and why they're certainly doing what it is they're doing. That's what an Aries person does. They do, they act, they are impulsive, they are led by the desire and potency of all that they're capable of, and it comes shooting out of them like a bolt of lightning. An Aries animal, right? The animal that represents the sign of Aries is a ram, and it's very aptly named if you've ever seen an adult male sheep in action. It truly is ramming its head against whatever it is butting up against. And so this is the Aries person, right? Act first, ask questions later. Act first, maybe say I'm sorry later, right? So you have flashpoints here. You have instinctive, impulsive action with an Aries person. It is the sacred divine spark that is encapsulated in the seed. And since in the northern hemisphere, at least, we are coming into spring, it is the time of the seed's potency. Now in the southern hemisphere, coming into autumn, it is also consecrated to the seed, but just so briefly, as the seed will become dormant over the next 6 months, preparing for eventually its reemergence into potency. But either way, we're at a point of equinox, right? As of today, it's the 20th of March. I've already done the Starseed ministry. I'm getting this new moon forecast out to the Aries people and just giving a much more truncated, much more specific read on the next 2 weeks. Now, there is a lot of Aries in this chart, right? So we have the equinox, which means the sun is in the zodiac sign of Aries. The moon at the new moon will be in the zodiac sign of Aries. We have Mercury that just came into Aries. We have Chiron, what's been in Aries and will continue to be in Aries. Jupiter in Aries, and the asteroid Vesta, or Hestia, the hearth flame herself, also in Aries. So there's a lot of charge. There's a lot of impulsive action oriented energy here, Aries, that you are really coming into alignment with as an Aries person. Now, I am feeling it, right? I do not have very strong representation in Aries in particular, but boy, I've been feeling it all day. And what's interesting is that there is very little to balance you out right now, Aries. Now, there may be stuff in your individual charts that could help with this, but in terms of the current astrology, there ain't nothing over in Libra except the dwarf planet Ceres, the goddess of agriculture. She's at the very first degree of Libra in her retrograde, which means she's going back into Virgo, which is the sign that she actually wants to be in, because that is the ripening of the fruit, right? The ripening of the head or the grain, right? That's Virgo, is the time of year when the fruit is ripening here in the northern hemisphere. So it is patience and prudence and knowing when to act. And boy, if there was ever a difficult placement for Aries people, it is Virgo. So last forecast I did was for the full moon in Virgo, and I was very meticulous. I pulled it all apart just in typical Virgo fashion, every detail being addressed. But for Aries, right out the gate, we're just going to get this, we're just going to fly through this because it's going to be as a flashpoint, just like the Aries person. And like I said, there's not much balancing you out right now. There's a lot of representation in your sign, but the full moon on the 6th of April is really going to illuminate, because this is where we're going to get to in this forecast. It's going to illuminate for you, Aries, in terms of your relationships. And even if you're not an Aries rising person, still Libra being opposite, maybe your sun, maybe your moon, maybe you are an Aries rising and it's opposite in your 7th house. Regardless, there is some sort of oppositional polarity point that will be brought to your awareness through the full moon about a calm mind. But right now, it is hot, right? You can feel it. There's a charge in the air. And Aries people, it's coming right to the essence of who you are, how you feel, and how you express yourself, depending on what Aries you are looking at here. So we're going to look at an Aries rising chart, but even as an Aries sun or a moon, there's still going to be relevance here for you. So today, like I said, is the 20th. It is the equinox. So we're going to start at the new moon, which is again 0 degrees of Aries. Tomorrow, the 21st. This is at 1:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The moon will come into a conjunction with Mercury tomorrow as well, and is, point by point going to come and conjunct with all of the Aries energy, Mercury, Chiron, Jupiter, Vesta, which you don't see on this chart, but I assure you she's there. So over the next 2 days, Aries, as the moon moves through your sign, maybe moves through your first house, there is going to be a direct emotional connection to all of these bodies and planets and luminaries, so that you have direct emotional experience with them. And if the moon represents our internal waters, our internal plasma, and how that holds a charge, and because water holds a charge and it is conductive, all of these connections are going to have their impact on you directly. So, be as gracious as you can. Don't try to suppress yourself, Aries, because it's not in your nature to do so. But just keep in mind that your ruling planet of Mars, by the time we get to Saturday, the 25th, is going to move into Cancer. And we've had Mars, your ruling planet, in Gemini, which is in a sextile to your sign, which is in a favorable and harmonious connection to Aries now for months on end. It was retrograde in Gemini, so it went retrograde around 26 degrees of Gemini. It went retrograde back to the early degrees, about 8 degrees or so of Gemini, which is conjunct Aldebaran, right? One of the royal fixed stars related to Archangel Michael. You're talking about the commander of the heavenly armies here. So there is even more of this energy of battle and armor and fighting and warrior nature, right? Now, Mars, as your ruling planet, is out of its retrograde shadow and has been for a couple of days, and is soon going to come into Cancer. So it will be time to not make a decision and plant that flag in exactly where you're going to make your stand. And with Mars in Gemini, it has been a lot of learning, a lot of relearning, all of those squares to Neptune and Pisces where you're like, what am I learning? Is this what I am? Is this real? I'm not even sure. A lot of confusion, new ideas, the fog of war, all of this Neptune stuff, the purging of things with Neptune and Pisces, right? The boundarylessness, the formlessness, also the imagination and creativity and compassion. Mars is just penetration, and in Gemini it is pioneering new territory for the most part, and certainly learning, right? So it will be time to put that to use, and Mars is going to change direction, and instead of moving up towards the sun in this infinite mutable space of ideas, is going to have to put some roots down somewhere. And today's reading with the Starseed Ministry was really difficult, because that's going to be hard when things may not go exactly the way that you want them to go. And if anyone wants things to go their way, it's usually an Aries person. Well, I'd say fire signs in general, right? Because there's action engaged with that. So Mars is going to be in Cancer by the 25th. And so really Mars is already coming into a square with not only the equinox, but with this new moon in its home sign already. So you can feel the tension already. And like I said, 0 degrees Cancer is, the soldier or the sailors on a ship. They bring down an old flag and they raise a new one. This is about making a decision where you belong, where you're committed to, and eventually consolidating your power. This is where the root system puts that plant firmly in place in that position. And Mars does not necessarily want to be firmly planted in place. But the best use of that energy, Aries people, is to start tunneling down into your root system, into a place deeper than you've ever been, right? Because this is what's going to stabilize you. It's not necessarily going to be the projection of yourself out into the world, which is important and is a huge part of who you are, obviously, as an Aries person. But your ruling planet is going to start tunneling down deeper into the core of where your power really comes from. Your character, your integrity, your emotional self-esteem. This comes from the 4th house. Now, keep in mind here that 0 degrees Cancer is the point of the June solstice. So we're already, especially Aries people, are already kind of getting an idea of acting on where that's going to be in June. So if you are actually interested, before we move on, just to do my shameless plug here, so that you can maybe get a forecast for yourself. I am offering the vernal equinox seasonal forecast right now. It's at my website, which is linked in the description box below, no matter what platform you're watching on. And you can book either a 60 or 90 minute reading. It's a recorded reading. We look at your natal chart, your progressions, if you have starseed markings that we've gone over, all of these things. It's very comprehensive, and we're looking at the entire season, giving you an idea of what to expect, right? So when you do make your instinctual, impulsive actions, Aries, you're doing it with full awareness, full trust, and surrender to whatever creative force you identify yourself with, right? So you can book that if you want to get the seasonal forecast. And I have 2 options here to fit different financial situations. I know that's an issue all the time, right? And the other thing too is for Aries and Libra people, if maybe you have Libra, maybe you know Libra people in your life, the lunar transit forecast, which would cover just this lunar transit period, right? So the new moon in Aries up to the full moon in Libra to the next new moon, which, by the way, is also going to be in your sign. It's going to be 30 degrees of Aries, and it's a total solar eclipse. So you may want to consider I don't know, just consider it. Lunar transit forecast, 30-minute or 60-minute report at a sale rate. If you are an Aries or Libra sun, moon, and rising person, you can book this again through catalystenergies.net. And boy, the Aries energy is just... My 3rd house is Aries, by the way, so... It is really just what's coming out of my mouth is just, it's not really always thought out entirely. And so when you shoot from the hip, sometimes it works really, really well for someone like me. And other times it's just like, blah, blah, blah. So I will do my best to bring the energy back to center here, try to balance myself out with some Libra energy in terms of the mental sphere. So if you are part of the monthly membership, the Starseed Fellowship, or the Catalyst Classroom, this sale rate is open to you no matter what and when, regardless of your sign. So that's something that you can consider as well. So anyway, my shameless plug. Just to let you know what your options are, Aries, if you're like, I'd love to know what to expect before I shoot from the hip with all of this stuff. Now, new moons they are just the seed, right? Their intention being set. And over the course of the next 4 weeks, the moon herself is the mediator of the sun's energy. And 0 to 1 degrees Aries is this woman rising from the ocean. And it's so tenuous, right? Just because the seed is viable right now, it doesn't mean it's going to fulfill its potential through the course of the growing cycle, for instance. It needs to be planted. It needs to be nourished and cared for, right? All along the way. And Aries people, you also have to be nourished and cared for and rooted, and you have to flower, and then you have to, your fruit must ripen. All of these things are important, but the seed And what is encapsulated within the seed is just as important. And I think that this is a great place to start with you as a person in terms of what is your potential, where are you feeling this impulse to be yourself, and to really set the intention to grow over the course of the next month and just the whole season as well, because this is really taking us up to that solstice, especially with your ruling planet about to come into Cancer. That's a strong energy right now for the Aries people in terms of where this is all going and how important it is to be intentional and to be able to recognize how tenuous it still is right now, and things can fail really easily. And a lot has had to do with the energy coming from Pisces into Aries right now. And as I'm recording this, the moon is still in Pisces. So let's go by play by play here and get an idea of what to expect, okay, Aries? So like I said, we have our conjunction. We have the moon that's going to meet Mercury also on the 21st. And the moon meeting Mercury on the surface seems like a good idea, right? It seems like a good idea because it's like the mind becomes very emotionally attuned and sensitive. But the thing about it is that it also creates changeable moods, emotional sensitivity to what otherwise is a rational frame of mind, and strong emotional bonds about anything, especially the way that you emotionally project yourself, Aries, as the moon is in your sign. They can really, those strong emotional bonds can really cloud your judgment when you need judgment. And since Mercury is also in your sign, I would say that this is just even more so. Especially coming out of the new moon. And this degree, 6 degrees of Aries, is very much about this it's like a square. Actually, the symbol, the Sabian symbol, or the Sabian symbol, however you pronounce it, is a square with one of its sides brightly illuminated. And it's the idea that we have this urge for one-sided stability. And so maybe these strong emotional bonds and the changeable moods and sensitivities coming from within yourself. And there can be a lot of mood swings with something like this. And you may find yourself really wanting to emotionally express yourself. And remember, Aries is a flashpoint, and a moon in Aries is definitely when people either feel inflammation. And for Aries people, I have a feeling you're going to want to really express yourself emotionally. So be mindful about how you're doing that. And at the very least, be mindful of the possibility that your mood may shift very rapidly as the moon leads up to Mercury, conjuncts it, and then comes off of it by the end of Tuesday, because it's going to meet with Chiron on the 22nd, which is what we're going to look at next. And these are really important moments, because not only is the moon going to be meeting Chiron on Wednesday the 22nd, it's going to meet Chiron at very close, and Jupiter for that matter, at the degree of the full moon, right? So the sun will be at these degrees when the full moon happens on the 6th of April. So the moon is going to be picking up. The moon has the energy of the sun and is kind of a placeholder when it's connecting to Chiron and to Jupiter at this time when the full moon will be opposite in Libra, and really illuminating, do you have a calm mind? Can you keep yourself in the face of your relationships? Can you keep yourself calm and steady and stable? Can you be the hub of the wheel in your relationships as you are also allowing that divine spark to move through you? I think on Wednesday, it will be one of those moments that you'll come back to on the 6th at the full moon and be like, okay, now what I felt was an inner stirring or an emotional connection to my wounds, to my victim nature, which is Chiron, to the things that I thought that I needed in order to be successful, when I'm realizing that the only way to really be successful and to heal is to give these things up, right? Remember, Chiron's hybridization did not save his ass. It did not. It made him really good at what he did, but in the end, he gave it up so that he could release himself from his own suffering. And I want you to consider this as the moon crosses Chiron and you are starting to emotionally connect with that, right? What are the unseen forces in the world around you that you are attuning yourself to? Are you attuning yourself to what is easy for you to continue perpetuating through your hybridization? And I say that either literally, some people that is literal, and other people it's more about, what makes you the wounded healer? What is it what trauma are you holding on to that has allowed you to assist other people, but is keeping that wound open in you over and over and over again? The moon crossing Chiron on the 22nd, you're going to feel it really strongly. And you're going to be like, how do I feel about myself in relation to this? Do I feel like that I can give these things up, these wounds, these traumas, these hurts? Can I give them up in order to release myself from my suffering? Do I feel like that my identity is going to be somehow squashed if I give up this identity of the wounded healer, right? And some people, it is about some sort of hybridization or augmentation. And if that doesn't make sense to you, that's okay. Other people, I know it will, and that's who that's for. But whatever that is for you, whatever wounds or traumas made an impact that gave you a superpower, and truly, many people who are gifted healers and empaths usually get that way because early in life, they have been traumatized in a way that that gift has come up to the surface. I mean, we all have these abilities. It's inherent in being human to be empathic and telepathic, and the healing capacity is something we all have. But some people more than others have experienced things that have brought this to a level of sensitivity, and they've really been able to help other people. But at the same time, it keeps that wound open. You never actually heal. And you know who talks about this? Actually, Carolyn Myss is a really great resource. If you're interested, Anatomy of the Spirit, Sacred Contracts, she talks a lot about this, and she does not pull any punches, and she really pisses people off, or at least she did at one point, being just like, you're hanging on to your wounds of being a victim and whatever, not because you shouldn't acknowledge that happened, but you keep your own wounds open and kind of justify keeping them open. I think that's the important part about Chiron, is that you keep justifying it, keeping those wounds open as if like you aren't valuable unless you are that thing, right? That hybrid, that wounded healer. So these couple days are really crucial, Aries, as the moon comes through your sign and is hitting all of these points, especially because this is going to be where the full moon opposition will be. This will be where the sun is here. So the moon hits Chiron, and then right after that, this is the middle of the day on Wednesday. Right after that, it's going to meet Jupiter. So, oh boy, the moon conjunct Jupiter is, so you come to some sort of conclusion as the moon and Chiron come into a conjunction. And then the moon and Jupiter come into their conjunction. And Jupiter is not only at the star Tau Ceti, right? And if you're a starseed with Tau Ceti starseed markings, then this is really relevant to you. But then it comes into conjunction, and things that are started now with this conjunction that are based on really sound and good intention, like really righteous, truly righteous intentions of healing, right? Of compassion and love for yourself. If there's things started now with those intentions, will be successful. And there is an implication here of a type of inner withdrawal, right? That you may have to pull your energy back, Aries, into yourself in order to really kind of maintain your dignity. And perhaps that is going to be very difficult for you, since as an Aries person, your kind of default setting is outward, right? To expend as opposed to pull in. I'm going to suggest that there is still power to be had when you pull in and you still are kind of cycling your own energy, but in a kind of a withdrawn state. And in today's Starseed ministry, the reading, one of the gift cards was the isolation chamber, and it's about peace and knowing yourself. And sometimes you have to pull in order to have that experience. And I would say when the moon and Jupiter come together on Wednesday, depending on what kind of experience you had as the moon crossed Chiron in your sign, you may be like, you know what? Yeah, I don't need that identity as a wounded healer anymore. Like, I am still valuable. I am still a child of my creator, and I am still inherently myself. And I'm good enough just as I am, without having to, find a way to justify everything, the things that have happened to me. Doesn't mean that you aren't a healer, right? Or somebody who's in service to their community. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying here is that you may need to pull in, and which seems so counterintuitive to Jupiter, which is endlessly expansive. And the moon, it's like it's going to expand you emotionally in this way, but maybe that expansion will be more of an inner expansion, where you kind of pull in and let that expansion happen within you, and perhaps within you and your relationship to creator, to spirit, to God. And it's in you, it's in who you are. So if you're a moon in Aries, this might be a little bit easier to do. If you're a sun in Aries, this may be kind of difficult. But of course, Jupiter and the sun, they have a connection to each other. So perhaps that won't be nearly as difficult. I think with the moon in Aries, it might be a little bit more... it's something that won't take as much of an effort to kind of pull in. Whereas a sun in Aries, perhaps it may pull in, considering that the sun is in Aries right now as well. So, and then at that point, we come into the 23rd, and this is a big deal. This is when Pluto comes into the zodiac sign of Aquarius for the first time. Now, Pluto's going to be in Aquarius for at least till 2041, a little bit after that, when it permanently comes into Pisces. So Pluto's going to be in the sign of Aquarius, of the sign of civilization, of networking, of humanity, the collective voice. It's going to be here for a while, okay? So when Pluto comes into Aquarius, we're going to start feeling a really big shift in power dynamics, okay? It went from the institutions themselves, like the physical materium that is unfolding through our economy, through our healthcare systems, through our extended families, through our governments, whatever physical, material-based institutions, an ecosystem, whatever it is, the crystalline structure. It's now moving into the energetics, right, of the wavelengths themselves, the frequency itself of life. And we're going to feel a shift in the power all of us, right? But for you, Aries, it's so connected to what Aquarius actually represents, which is the 11th house. And so you're going to start feeling the power dynamics that are part of the Pluto realm in the social networks as a whole, and less about the institutions and more about society as a collective. So when that happens, the moon is going to cross over the Andromeda galaxy. Now, the moon is moving through the Andromeda constellation from right before it's conjunct with Chiron. I should have mentioned that earlier now that I'm saying it. So 14 degrees of Aries, the moon comes into conjunction with the stars that are in the Andromeda constellation. And it'd probably be worth looking, actually. And if I remember to do it, looking at where exactly the moon is moving in terms of its latitude in relation to Andromeda. So, because it's probably going to pass right through the constellation of Andromeda. And again, Andromeda and starseeds, this is going to be relevant to you. But once it gets to the Andromeda galaxy, which is 27 degrees Aries, this is where the moon will be as Pluto is coming into Aquarius. And for those of you who have this in your chart, you know that this is one of those, this is a moment that's just like freedom is the only thing, right? Freedom, liberty, independence. Andromeda galaxy starseeds especially, they want to spread their wings and fly. They are not hip to emotional manipulation. They are not into being gaslit. They will say bye Felicia to anybody that is pulling that shit in their life. And if you are a strong Aries person, which, you know, I'm probably talking to a strong Aries people, there is the potential to emotionally get really combative about this because you're just like, hell no, right? And I'm not saying this is a good or bad thing. What I'm saying is that you're going to feel this, as Pluto is coming into the sign of humanity as a whole. And going to have to come to terms with that, because this is also very close to where the next new moon will be, which is the total solar eclipse on the 20th of April. So the moon comes into the last degrees of Aries, Pluto comes into Aquarius, and the moon will come into a sextile with the chart ruler of you, which is Mars, on the 23rd, all right, at the very last degree. So actually, if we really want to get technical, this is where let's go back. This is actually where the total solar eclipse will be, 30 degrees Aries, in a sextile to Mars, which is at 30 degrees of Gemini. And this sextile in general, taking away the fact that it's Aries and Mars and Gemini and the moon, we're just going to look at the signs and the planets. So we're just going to look at moon, sextile Mars, competitive yet cooperative, right? That's a good thing. They're working together. Bravery comes naturally now, and you can satisfy this inner drive that you are feeling, Aries, by fighting for a just cause on behalf of family and clan. And let me tell you what, family and clan, that is fourth house in Cancer all day long. This is about, it's time to make a decision. You're going to feel it. You're going to feel that there are natural boundaries, that all of the potency and desire must be embedded in the soil in order to grow, and that substantiation is inevitable. And the sextile to Mars at the last degree of Gemini is like the show is over, and it's time to make a decision about where you're going to put this energy. And this is really strong because when we get to the eclipse on the 20th, this total solar eclipse, this is where you are then is where you're going to be for the next 6 months. You are going to be in that duck pond, wherever that is. And I really encourage you to consider here, Aries, with this going, especially with Mars in these last degrees of Gemini and this sextile, that you really think about and feel into, you know, who you are and what's important to you, and tap into this natural bravery, right? Satisfy your inner drive by fighting for something that is really important to you and protecting your family, your clan, what, you know, your people, you know, your land, whatever it is, whatever roots you to life itself is going to be what you want to really fight for and satisfy that inner drive, because you can't, you know, once the seed is planted, that's it. You don't unplant it and get to start over, or you don't get to necessarily, especially emotionally, you don't get to emotionally just like stay in seed land forever. Now, as an Aries person, you're going to feel that in different ways, but the moon is trucking right along, and emotionally and internally, you're going to feel this this natural competitive spirit, but it's cooperative and you have somewhere to put it, okay? And this is when Pluto comes into Aquarius, right? There's going to be a big shift here. And you can already feel it building. Now, I mean, for those of you who are paying attention to politics at all, and you've been hearing the rigmarole about Trump, I mean, do you think it's an accident that planning for the day of the new moon in Aries? I don't think so. I mean, there are lots of people attempting to, put their spark onto the new moon at the equinox as well. So, know where you belong and where you stand, because this is going to have a big impact on how you emotionally feel. And maybe the isolation chamber is where you want to be, because it actually allows you to know who you truly are and what's important to you. And Mars is going to act on that, okay? And Mars is your chart ruler. Or your planetary ruler, right? It is your representative. So the moon will come into Taurus and it will square Pluto right away. Wow, how lucky. And now we're coming into your second house. So the moon squares Pluto, and this is where deep buried feelings are exposed when the moon squares Pluto, right? It's cross purposes. It can lead to very destructive and compulsive behavior, emotional power struggles when the moon squares Pluto. And the best way to deal with a transit like this is to be consciously aware of what's going on so that you can deal with the dark side of human behavior, because not everybody is going to be consciously aware of how the dark side of human behavior is influencing them emotionally. Now, the moon is exalted in Taurus, okay? It likes to be there almost a little too much, right? It just kind of nestles into the world around it and we emotionally find security through our material security. When it squares Pluto, it's 0 degrees Aquarius, which is like, whoa, this is so much bigger. And this has to do with more than just your individual feels. This is about the power that's extracted from the human collective and how long it's, is it going to be there well after you are there? 0 degrees Aquarius is an old Adobe mission, and this is not an endorsement of any religious whatever. This is the idea that those individuals that built these missions understood that what they were doing in their lifetime was building structures that were meant to last well beyond their lifetime. So keep in mind that Pluto is absolutely on the front end here of the destruction process of what ultimately will be a rebuilding. And so it will start with pulling away and destroying everything that has been built up socially. And the moon in Taurus is like, I just want to be my natural, uncontaminated self. And it's like, are you actually naturally and uncontaminated? I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I think we all have to answer that question, but it's going to have a lot to do with the physical world around you that you are asking that question versus society as a whole, Aries. So the moon will square Pluto, and then right after that, it's going to come into a sextile with Saturn. So that's actually a good thing, because Saturn is sitting at the degree that we had our last new moon at, and this is an electrical storm, right? Something that is very disturbing, but also is homeostasis. Right? Natural lightning is a charge in the atmosphere balancing itself. And yeah, it's destructive. Yeah, it could start a forest fire. Yeah, it could burn your house down. But what you get out of that is a rebalancing. And a moon sextile Saturn is definitely going to give you the capacity to tap into some emotional security or maturity and the ability to handle difficult situations. Maybe you need to find a place to hide from the fallout of the storm. Maybe Saturn is just like, hey, did you do everything you needed to do over the last month to prepare yourself for this situation? Because now the walls are kind of, Saturn is just like the foot is coming down about this, right? These are definitive karmic structures with Saturn, even in Pisces, still is a karmic deliverance. And the moon in Taurus is like, whoa, I'm getting shocked, right? I'm being influenced by this sudden redistribution of energy, but the moon sextile Saturn is a good thing. Maybe that shock will be exactly what you need to be like, oh shit, I need to take this seriously, right? And then the moon comes into conjunction with her own north node just hours later, and the north node in Taurus, as I've been talking about, is the widow at an open grave. And this is where we have an emotional and very personal connection to that soul trajectory of discarding the past, of accepting that all material compounds decay, all social bonds decay, and that's part of being in a physical reality. And it's our attachment to those things that causes us suffering. It's a very Buddhist thing. And this is where the soul is pulling us to evolve right now, 4 to 5 degrees of Taurus with the North Node. And I'm not saying that you should just like fold over and give up, Aries, about anything. What I'm saying is that the cycle is fulfilling itself regardless of what you want or not. And so it's going to be in the land of resources for you, and what's valuable to you, what is in the world around you that is physical and tangible and has real value, whether that be your currency, your income, your job, your land, your physical possessions, your genetics, right? I mean, Taurus in the second house is very much what is physically ours. And is at our disposal. So then we come into the 24th, which is Friday. Okay, so I'm sure things are going to be really exciting at this point. The moon will conjunct Venus, 8 to 9 degrees of Taurus, and this is going to be, we really are going to feel a very strong need to create some inner happiness in dark hours, and especially in terms of your physical resources, Aries, right? You may have to pull I know this is out of season, but you may have to pull a Charlie Brown here, right? Actually, wasn't it Linus, or was it Linus that brought they brought the tiny little tree, and they had their moment about the Christmas tree, and everybody was hating on Charlie Brown, but really they realized that it was up to them to create happiness in the dark hours, right? So the thing with Moon and Venus together, I mean, they're both really powerful here. Venus is in her home sign. The Moon is exalted here. And so this could be very favorable if, Aries, you take advantage of this moment to create inner happiness in the dark hours, to feel into the value of, to emotionally tap into what you're physically feeling into with Venus and Taurus, what is valuable, drawing to you what it is that you need. And then the moon comes into conjunction with Uranus right after that. And so your stability kind of goes out the window by the end of Friday, as is the case with all kinds of Uranian types of transits, especially with Uranus and Taurus, right? It's literally shifting the landscape, the physical landscape of resources and the land. And this is the battle between the pitchforks and the torches, right? Now, when the moon is conjunct Uranus, so when you have these conjunctions, they are influencing the moon a lot. And so there's subconscious impulsiveness, sudden events affecting your inner emotional landscape, flashes of insight. It's okay if you feel detached or isolated from people who you are close to, your family members, because there's like an eccentricity here that other people may not get. And part of that is you finding yourself in the middle of the pitchforks and the torches here with Uranus that is shaking everything up and never giving you anything solid to stand on. And you may get flashes of insight in these moments of like, oh, I'm just the Buddha under the Bodhi tree here, and I'm going to let this play out and realize that it's in the moment that I'm always in, and not getting caught up necessarily in one side or the other of this repolarization. It just might seem a little weird, but I think the flashes of insight are going to be really important in these moments. So and then we come into the 25th, which is when Mars actually enters Cancer, and it immediately comes into a quincunx with Pluto. And so you get even more of this kind of, how do I put this? You get even more of this edginess with Mars quincunx Pluto. So let me get it exact here. And the moon's going to be crossing over the Pleiades at this point too. So you become more assertive and competitive, right? Mars quincunx Pluto. It's an inconjunct. There's a lot of strong resistance from other people. The key to success is deciding on one single goal and not getting distracted. And I think that with Mars in Cancer, this just makes it even that much more, so, kind of consolidated and singularly rooted somewhere. Listening to advice, developing an informed opinion. These are all ways that you can deal with this energy. And lapses in judgment can lead to mistakes. And when you're talking about Pluto in Aquarius like this, Mars, for you Aries, Mars is like, you know what, I'm making my decision. But I think that we have to be very realistic about Pluto and Aquarius and how powerful this actually is, right? And so you may need to listen more. You may need to take a step back from your pushing past that resistance from other people and be willing to develop an informed opinion as opposed to, well, I'm just Mars and I'm just going to raise that flag and I'm just going to be really assertive and competitive, because Pluto is going to be like, well, I have the final word and that's all there is to it. So just be mindful of that on Saturday. You may not have all of the information, okay? And you certainly aren't going to get exactly where you're going to go, Aries, by just Mars pushing downward. You're going to have to, feel into the uncomfortable resistance with Pluto in Aquarius, the sign of humanity as a whole, and then maybe you need to listen to something that you haven't listened to before, okay? And like I said, the moon's going to be crossing over the Pleiades at that point, going to sextile Neptune. It's going to, and then when it comes into Gemini, right? So it'll conjunct Alcyon. So it's going to cross the Pleiades, cross Algol, and then it's going to come into that 0 degree mark of Gemini, which is a glass bottom boat, okay? Where your consciousness is that glass bottom, so it's completely transparent, but you're not completely giving yourself over to the collective unconscious. And at this point, the moon is in its crescent phase, so we're starting to feel the resistance and be aware of the resistance that the seed would normally feel, right? And the seed would feel as it germinates and has to push up through the soil and then pop out of the ground and then has to fight against all the elements to grow strong, right? So the moon pops up into Gemini, 0 degrees. This is conjunct Alcyon and is in a trine to Pluto. And we become increasingly emotionally sensitive with a moon trine Pluto, but this is a really good time to probe deeply and have intense emotional encounters in a way where the glass bottom, the actual surface of that glass bottom boat is going to keep us from getting pulled into the underworld or into the formlessness of Pluto in Aquarius, right? It's going to keep us from getting consumed by it, but also looking very deeply. So this is a really important transit for this Pluto and Aquarius energy. And perhaps it will come out of the need to adjust ourselves with this Mars-Pluto quincunx, and then the moon goes through the Pleiades, and we have our heart moments with the heart chakra related to late Taurus and the Pleiadian energy, and then the moon at Alcyon is in a trine to Pluto, and we're like, you know what? I'm really going to go much, much deeper into the subconscious, into these areas without getting lost here, right? Without getting sucked into the metaverse or getting sucked into the Borg, right? Or just getting sucked into the power of the collective voice as a whole, right? You still have to maintain one's sense of authenticity. So the moon comes into Gemini on Sunday the 26th, and is in a conjunction with Chiron. So now here's more Aries energy. When we come into the 26th, which is Sunday. So Mercury and Chiron come into conjunction. Again, it's going to be 15 to 16 degrees of Aries. So in your sign, Aries. And again, attunement to the potency of invisible forces of nature. So at this point, Mercury and Chiron coming together is going to be a much more pragmatic and certainly much more curious, right? Because Mercury really is about curiosity, discovery, exploration. And so maybe it's less emotional and more curious and more conceptual in terms of, well, what forces am I attuning to? Am I attuning to the things that keep me in a perpetual victim mode? Or am I attuning to those nature spirits and that intuitive, holistic way of being that will actually is able to see the whole picture of what I can grow into? It means you have to leave behind the victim status. And it's not to say that you shouldn't acknowledge the things that have happened. That has to be said. We can't be silent about those things because people need to know and people need to be held accountable. But Mercury isn't about our emotions. Mercury is about knowledge and curiosity. So I suspect that there will be more of a curiosity about these things by Sunday, as opposed to an emotional kind of like, oh, that is really raw and tender, and I don't want to feel that. Now, the 27th is Monday, and then the 28th is what I want to look at because that's our first quarter moon. And the first quarter moon is going to be, it's going to be in Cancer, right? Right after it comes into conjunction with your ruling planet of Mars. So, let's cue this up, shall we? All right, guys. So, before that happens, you're going to see that Mercury and Jupiter come into a conjunction, 18 to 19 degrees Aries. This is like a magic carpet where you transcend all of the strife and you use your creative imagination. And this is where Mercury and Jupiter conjunct with each other. So this is a great time to make plans, write down the ideas that are coming to you, use of your creative imagination, right? You have Mercury that rules the mind and Jupiter that rules the understanding coming into a conjunction. This is very favorable. And in this degree, this is really about like getting out of the trenches and really seeing and detaching yourself from all of the feels of the situation or the strife that's related to it, kind of take those RPMs down a little bit, kind of get a larger perspective and have some optimism about where things are going for you, Aries, and especially in terms of you as a person. Again, we're talking about you and your sign. Now the moon is in Cancer. It will conjunct Mars, which again really gives you a lot of courage and initiative and enthusiasm to act. And it's again about a man on a magic carpet. There is a lot of imagery about taking this high, road or having a much higher perspective that keeps you from your attachment to all of the events that would lead you into, being impulsive and impatient, right? And a moon conjunct Mars can make you impulsive and impatient. And maybe because you're kind of hovering up there, that is what makes you impulsive and impatient. But this is also a good transit to stand up for yourself and your family. The moon will trine Saturn as well on its way to this first quarter square. And there's patience and emotional strength here. There's a sense of really being tested emotionally. But Saturn in Pisces is like, we've all been through this before. Like there are markers along the way of how we've already dealt with this in the past, in past situations, in past incarnations, right? Because we are talking about Saturn in Pisces. So it's kind of the full soup of it all. So yes, there will be a testing of the will, I think, individually, but especially when it comes to moon in your fourth house, Aries. I mean, this is where you get real sensitive. But again, patience and emotional strength to handle the difficult situations, right? And that you've been here before. And then the moon will come into that square with the sun. And if you remember this degree of 8 to 9 degrees Aries, this is where Jupiter stationed retrograde and came out of retrograde. And it's a crystal gazer. And it's the idea that you, as an intuitive person, you get these impressions in full spectrum, and you keep your focus and concentration on the wholeness of the image in order to keep that image locked in place for you, right? You see the whole thing as it is, and then you go, the plan is revealed step by step as you trust the unfolding, right? But the full potential of the seed is kind of seen intuitively at this degree. The thing is that the moon in Cancer in this moment is really going to challenge you to actually kind of take a position of almost naivete in terms of where you're going, right? Just because you identify yourself and you really are just like, oh, this is all the potential I'm going to grow into. The moon in Cancer, of course, a first quarter moon, is going to be like, hey, the crisis in action, what am I going to do? Is going to be like, well, you have to also allow the sensitivity and almost the innocence to, just it's elusive. If you try to grab for it, it's like looking in if you're looking in the crystal, for instance, right? This is just an example. If you're looking into it and you see the big picture, you're identified, you got the sun in your sign, you're just like, just shining so brightly as this image. The minute you try to grab it, it's going to be elusive. And the moon is almost like you don't want to not try, but you can't get caught up in not being able to grasp something that is elusive. It's like a little kid dipping their hand into the pond and trying to grab the fish. Like, it's not going to work. And there's a sense of innocence about it. And this is going to be, especially after the moon crosses over Mars and is in that trine to Saturn, where you're really feeling tested. It's probably going to really test you. And this moment is going to be like, can you actually employ that innocence and that purity and understanding so that you don't get frustrated when you're actually being challenged, because that's part of the plan, right? Like, you have to experience some sort of challenge in order to really grow into yourself. Just like the root system has to dig through the soil and the rocks and whatever else is down. It has to put real momentum in order to consolidate its power. Very, very powerful. I think by this point, in just a week, Aries, you're going to really feel that frustration. And I implore you to not let that frustration take you over, but be willing to embrace that discomfort of that square, to be like, well, what am I going to do? It's not that you need to lose sight of the full picture of who you are and who you're going to be, but if you're relying on your ability to grab that fish down there, you're going to get disappointed. So realize that there's a real testing of the wills that's going to be happening here in general. And there's going to be, Saturn's in your 12th house now. And I mean, that can be a real bummer. It can be a real downer, especially in Pisces, like a wet blanket. So just also keep that in mind, that it's petrified tree trunks. It's not the full picture itself. It's just the remnants of how it's already gone. And yeah, it's petrified. Yeah, it's there. Yeah, you just have to dig it up, but it's not the full picture. And you certainly have an entire cycle to bring yourself to new creative potential. All right. And so I'm going to just kind of, the next big one is going to be, speaking of which, Mars trine Saturn, which is going, and Venus is going to conjunct Uranus on the 30th. So that's Tuesday, the 28th. That's in a week. So then you come into next Thursday, the 30th, and Mars and Saturn will come into a water trine. And in fact, they're kind of starting to come into a grand trine with the south node of the moon, which you'll see as you go through the rest of the week. So this type of transit gives you a lot of strength, ambition, perseverance, to take on very difficult tasks, right? Patience and self-discipline keeps you focused without distraction. There's lasting success. There's practical results. Excellent time to start something or lay a siege. Wow, that's funny. And I'd say when we're talking about water and the 4th house and the 12th house, like this Aries, I mean, this really has a lot to do with patience and self-discipline emotionally, because Aries people, especially with Mars involved, you're going to want to act out. And this is really giving you a lot of that ambition, strength, and perseverance to have your will tested in terms of your family, your inner power, where your power comes from, your private life, right? That's another thing about the 4th house, is your private life. Now, on the same day, Venus and Uranus are in a conjunction. And when these two come together, there's a sudden change in resources and in the world around you. So be ready. In some ways, I feel like that... this happens, this happens first, and then with just a couple hours, this happens, the Venus-Uranus conjunction. So just be aware by next week, even by next Thursday, there's going to be some serious testing for all of us. But for you, it's going to have a lot to do with your resources and your family, and your family emotionally, who you're committed to, your loyalty, your home, right? Where you feel safe. So, Aries. And then we have the moon come into Leo, and it's going to make a bunch of transits during Leo. And the next big transit actually is going to be on, so the weekend, I don't want to say the weekend will, you can even see here that the moon is starting to come into this grand water trine with the south node. And just reminding us that we've all been here before, and we'll be back again. But it's the 3rd. So the weekend, I feel like, is okay for the most part. And then we come into the 3rd, which is April 3rd, which is Monday, and Mercury comes into Taurus, right? And so... And comes into a square with Pluto almost immediately as it comes into Taurus. And so a Mercury square Pluto, I mean, leads to deep thinking, intense interactions. It's really going to challenge your thinking in terms of uninhibited, uncontaminated thoughts and mental energy, as opposed to the urge to dig deeper and investigate the truth with Pluto and Aquarius. There's a strong potential to uncover things here, and it's important to take the high road by maintaining an open mind with a transit like this, okay? So it feels like coming into next weekend, there's going to be some real challenges, and then the weekend will be kind of a lift. We'll have the moon go through Leo for the most part, and we'll all feel kind of like this authentic expression and creativity, and maybe joy and optimism, maybe grief, whatever it is, as long as it's authentic. But then we come out of it into Monday, Tuesday, the 4th, Wednesday, the 5th, where Mercury and Saturn come into a sextile, and we get some really good, solid judgment, right? Sound thinking with the moon's sextile Saturn. But then we're going to come into the full moon right there, right after that. And the sun conjunct Chiron as well. So you have Saturn and Mercury come into a sextile. You have the sun conjunct Chiron at 16 degrees. And then you have the full moon on the 6th, which is in Libra. Okay. And you can see that Lilith in Leo is making, is in a T-square to the nodes, and I think the change is going to be very difficult for many of us, right? Even anticipating it. But Aries, the potential for you to act out so impulsively needs to really be balanced out. And this is what the full moon is going to show you, right? Can you keep that clear, calm mind throughout this whole thing in your relationships? Are you able to kind of separate yourself, and kind of pull yourself in so that you do have a calm mind as like the shit is hitting the fan all around you? That's gonna be the question, right? A retired sea captain watches the ships entering and leaving the harbor. I think that's some, and Mercury will conjunct the North Node also on the 6th. And so where Venus was making that a very palpable, very materially embodied experience about not being attached to what is going away, Mercury reaching the North Node is going to be very conceptual, and maybe ideas that we had been holding on to also need to be, are going to decay just like everything else, and we have to let those go and discard the past as well. So leading up to this full moon, I think, is going to be really essential, Aries, for you to come to terms with your ability emotionally to be the hub in that wheel in all of your relationships as the storm is raging probably all around us, I would say. And there are so many opportunities here. Mercury sextile Saturn, right? To get this sense of clear thinking and good judgment. And Saturn at that point will start to come into conjunction with Fomalhaut, which is a royal fixed star related to Archangel Gabriel. So, I mean, the isthmus is a narrow band, but that narrow band of communication is pure and is spiritual, but it has to be the flow has to be, how do I say this? The flow has to be unimpeded. And if there's any congestion there, you're not going to get the full picture. It's not going to flow. So Mercury in that sextile is giving mental skills that are matched by honest communication. It's a good time for teaching. It's a good time to inform people about something important. And it's good for organizational skills and clear thinking, right? So there's lots of opportunities. A lot of it's going to be this Mars energy, though, that's going to really be testing you, Aries, as you have all of this energy in your sign, in your first house. It's like, I want to act. And Mars is like, okay, let's act. And it's like, act on what's important right in front of you, which is your family, your personal life, where you feel safe and secure, and how you're going to protect those places, right? Cancer is the crab, it is the shell, it is the holy grail, it is the womb, right? And without those things, the mushy inside, which is our emotional sensitivity, our love, our bonds with each other, they need to be nourished and protected, right? Just like the roots are what draw the waters into the plant, draw the waters of our soul into our experience. So Mars in Cancer is going to do you well, Aries, as long as you realize that, and keep in mind that when the moon moves through that area, it's going to be very sensitive, but at the same time, you're going to be like, okay, this is actually what's important to me, and I can feel that, and I can tap into that. So Aries, I'm going to leave it there for you. So don't forget, if you're interested in the shorty, right, the lunar transit forecast just over the next month, and Libra too, if you have Libra as well. But if you're also interested in the seasonal forecast, leading up to the solstice in June, you can also book the vernal equinox forecast, both through the website, both linked in the description. Well, the website is linked in the description box below. So I'm going to leave it there for you, Aries. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate you so much. You are the warriors, and you are really representing that energy for all of us right now. So take good care of yourselves. Take a deep breath before you shoot from the hip, and I will see you guys on the flip side. Bye.